In 1943, the United States government published guides teaching American families how to insulate their homes with newspapers. Victory Home programs distributed instructions nationwide. Millions of households followed the advice. Those guides disappeared after the war. The insulation industry replaced free newspaper methods with profitable manufactured products. Building codes changed to favor commercial materials. Within a generation, the government's own recommendations became forgotten knowledge. 80 years later, building scientists are rediscovering what those wartime guides taught. Paper insulation manages moisture better than foam. Treated cellulose resists fire better than synthetic materials. Newspaper-filled walls from the 1940s outlast foam-filled walls from the 1990s. The government knew paper insulation worked. Industry profits erased that knowledge from public memory. This is the story of how wartime necessity created better insulation than modern technology, and why the building industry does not want you to remember. Number 1. When newspapers became insulation. Material rationing during World War II left American families with a heating crisis. Commercial insulation production diverted to military applications. Mineral wool went to army barracks. Fiberglass went to aircraft manufacturing. New home construction stopped almost entirely, but existing homes still needed heat. Coal and heating oil faced rationing. The government launched campaigns urging families to conserve fuel by improving home insulation. Posters declared, "Heat your home, not the outdoors." The Office of Price Administration promoted weatherization as patriotic duty. Families improvised with whatever materials they could find. Newspapers accumulated in every household. Magazines piled up. Cardboard boxes arrived with rationed goods. These materials became insulation. The installation method was straightforward. Newspapers crumpled loosely and stuffed between wall studs. Magazines layered into attic spaces. Cardboard boxes flattened and fitted between framing members. Some families mixed sawdust with newspapers. Others used corn cobs in agricultural areas. Government guides actually recommended these techniques. Victory Home programs distributed instructions for scrap insulation. The methods were not considered inferior alternatives. They were presented as practical solutions using available resources. The practice continued after the war in rural areas and among families who could not afford commercial materials. Millions of American homes received newspaper insulation during the 1940s and 50s. Many still contain those original installations today. Number 2. How insulation actually works. Insulation does not generate heat. This fundamental misunderstanding leads to confusion about why materials perform differently. Insulation slows heat transfer by trapping air in tiny pockets where it cannot circulate. Still, air conducts heat poorly. Moving air transfers heat efficiently through convection. Any material that creates thousands of tiny air pockets and prevents air movement will insulate. The specific material matters less than the structure of trapped air it creates. Newspaper crumpled loosely creates exactly this structure. Each wrinkle and fold traps a small pocket of air. Layered newspapers multiply these pockets into millions. The paper itself contributes minimal insulating value. The trapped air does the actual work. This principle explains why thickness matters more than material density. A thick layer of loosely crumpled newspaper outperforms a thin layer of high-tech foam. More air pockets means more resistance to heat transfer. Industry created the R-value measurement to quantify insulation performance. R-value measures resistance to heat flow per inch of material thickness. Higher numbers indicate better insulation. The measurement became the primary way consumers compare products. Here is what R-value measurements reveal. Newspaper and recycled paper cellulose insulation achieve R values between 3.2 and 3.8 per inch. Fiberglass bats achieve similar values. Open-cell spray foam performs nearly identically. Only closed-cell spray foam significantly exceeds paper products, achieving R6 to R7 per inch. The expensive modern material outperforms paper by a factor of roughly 2. Not 10, not 5. 2. And that advantage exists only under laboratory conditions with controlled temperature, zero moisture, and perfect installation. Real buildings do not match laboratory conditions. Temperature varies. Moisture exists. Installation quality ranges from excellent to terrible. Under real-world conditions, the gap between paper and foam narrows considerably. In some situations, it reverses entirely. Number 3. The moisture advantage paper has over foam. Every family produces moisture simply by living. Breathing releases water vapor. Cooking releases water vapor. Bathing releases water vapor. A family of 4 generates 2 to 3 gallons of moisture daily, just through normal activities. This moisture must go somewhere. In winter, warm, moist interior air pushes toward cold exterior walls. The vapor pressure drives moisture into wall cavities continuously. What happens next determines whether walls survive or rot. Paper insulation handles moisture through absorption and release. Cellulose fibers absorb moisture when humidity rises. They release moisture when humidity falls. This buffering action prevents condensation from forming on cold surfaces. The wall cavity stays drier overall because moisture moves through rather than accumulating. Foam insulation handles moisture through blocking. Closed-cell spray foam creates a vapor barrier that stops moisture movement completely. The moisture cannot pass through. Instead, it accumulates at the interface between foam and wood framing. This sounds like good news. Keeping moisture out seems like the right approach. Building science reveals the opposite is true. Moisture reaches wall cavities through multiple pathways. Air leakage around electrical boxes, gaps in vapor barriers, and imperfect foam application all allow moisture entry. Once moisture enters a foam-insulated wall, it cannot escape. The foam that blocked moisture entry also blocks moisture exit. Wood framing, surrounded by trapped moisture, begins to rot. Mold colonies establish in concealed locations. Structural damage progresses invisibly for years. Homeowners discover problems only during renovation or when damage becomes severe. Contractors increasingly report foam-related moisture damage. Walls insulated with spray foam in the 1980s and 90s now reveal rotted studs and widespread mold. Insurance claims for foam moisture damage have increased significantly. Number 4. What R-value measurements miss? R-value testing occurs under laboratory conditions that never exist in real buildings. Constant temperature, zero moisture, no air movement, perfect installation without gaps or compression. The resulting numbers describe ideal performance, not actual performance. Real buildings fail these laboratory conditions in multiple ways. Temperature varies dramatically between day and night, summer and winter. Moisture exists in every occupied structure. Air moves through gaps, cracks, and imperfect seals. Installation quality depends on individual workers having good or bad days. Thermal bridging represents the first major gap in R-value thinking. Wood framing members conduct heat far better than insulation. Heat flows through studs, bypassing insulation entirely. High R-value foam between studs still loses heat through the studs themselves. Dense packed cellulose reduces thermal bridging effects better than rigid foam because it contacts framing surfaces completely. Air infiltration represents the second major gap. R-value assumes no air movement. Real walls have gaps around electrical boxes, plumbing penetrations, and top and bottom plates. Air flowing through these gaps bypasses insulation regardless of R-value. Cellulose installed at proper density limits air movement. Foam can shrink over time, creating gaps that allow airflow. Moisture effects represent the third and most damaging gap. Wet insulation loses insulating value immediately. Foam traps moisture but maintains R-value in the short term. Long-term moisture accumulation degrades both insulation and structure. Paper insulation releases moisture, recovering full performance after drying cycles. The industry emphasizes R-value because it favors expensive foam products. A single number comparison appears to show foam superiority. The reality involves dozens of factors that R-value ignores completely. Number 5. Fire resistance truth. The obvious objection arises immediately. Paper burns. Filling walls with newspapers seems like creating a fire hazard. Modern foam must be safer than flammable paper. The assumption is exactly backward. Tested properly, treated paper insulation outperforms foam in fire resistance. Understanding why requires examining how fires actually behave in wall cavities. Paper chars when exposed to flame. The charred layer protects underlying material from further burning. Without sufficient oxygen, paper smolders rather than producing open flame. Wall cavities contain limited oxygen. Fires in paper-filled cavities spread slowly, if at all. Modern cellulose insulation receives borate treatment during manufacturing. Borate is a mineral salt that prevents ignition and flame spread. Borate-treated cellulose achieves Class A fire rating, the same classification given to non-combustible materials like concrete and steel. The flammable paper becomes essentially fireproof through simple mineral treatment. Foam insulation presents different fire behavior entirely. Most foam products ignite readily without protection. Building codes require thermal barriers, typically drywall, between foam and occupied spaces. The foam itself receives no fire resistance. The barrier provides protection. When fires reach foam, serious problems emerge. Burning foam releases toxic fumes including hydrogen cyanide and carbon monoxide. Foam melts and drips, spreading fire to lower levels. Melted foam bypasses fire stops designed for traditional materials. Firefighters report that foam-insulated structures burn differently and more dangerously. Fire departments in some jurisdictions have issued specific warnings about foam insulation. Structural collapse risks differ from traditional construction. Toxic fume exposure increases for firefighters. Ventilation strategies may require modification. World War II newspaper insulation typically received no treatment. Dense packed paper still resisted fire better than expected because oxygen limitations prevented open combustion. Modern treated cellulose improves on wartime performance significantly. Number 6. Why the industry shifted away. If newspaper and cellulose insulation perform well, why did the building industry shift to foam? The answer involves economics rather than performance. Foam insulation requires petroleum products. The petrochemical industry profits from every spray foam installation. Cellulose uses recycled newspaper, a waste product with minimal profit margin. Following the money explains the industry trajectory. Installation speed creates additional economic pressure. Spray foam applies quickly with specialized equipment. Contractors complete jobs faster, reducing labor costs and increasing daily revenue. Loose newspaper installation requires manual labor without expensive equipment. Time is money in construction. Marketing advantages favor modern materials. New technology sells better than old methods. Higher R-value numbers sound impressive in advertising. Foam looks modern and high-tech. Newspaper looks cheap and old-fashioned. Building codes developed with industry input. Insulation manufacturers participate in code development processes. R-value requirements written into codes favor high-number materials. Moisture performance receives little attention in most jurisdictions. Fire testing standards accommodate industry products. DIY potential threatens industry profits. Anyone can stuff newspapers into walls. Cellulose requires only basic blowing equipment. Spray foam requires expensive professional installation. Products requiring professional installation guarantee ongoing contractor business. The shift from paper to foam followed economic logic rather than performance logic. Manufacturers and contractors benefited from the change. Homeowners received products that performed no better and sometimes worse than what their grandparents used for free. Number Chapter. Modern cellulose revival. Commercial cellulose insulation now represents the building industry's acknowledgement that paper-based insulation works. Modern cellulose consists of approximately 85% recycled newspaper treated with 15% borate. The material is essentially what wartime families used, processed and treated for professional installation. Green building programs increasingly favor cellulose over foam. LEED certification awards credits for recycled content that cellulose provides. Passive house designers specify cellulose for its moisture management advantages. Historic preservation guidelines recommend cellulose as compatible with older building techniques. Environmental calculations strongly favor cellulose. Embodied energy, the energy required to manufacture insulation, runs lowest for cellulose among all commercial options. Recycled content typically exceeds 80%. No petroleum products are required. Manufacturing diverts newspaper from landfills. Professional installation uses blowing equipment similar to what applies loose-fill fiberglass. Dense pack installation achieves 3.5 pounds per cubic foot, optimal for both thermal and air sealing performance. Wet spray application works for new construction. All methods require equipment, but no specialized chemistry. Cost comparisons favor cellulose dramatically. Material costs run approximately one-third the price of spray foam. Installation costs stay lower because equipment is simpler and widely available. Long-term value improves further because moisture damage claims virtually disappear. DIY applications remain possible for appropriate situations. Outbuildings and sheds often fall outside code requirements. Emergency or temporary situations may justify improvised insulation. Supplemental insulation in existing attic spaces works for handy homeowners. Local regulations must be checked before proceeding. The basic wartime method still works. Crumple newspapers loosely. Layer into cavities at 3 to 4 pounds per cubic foot. Treat with borate solution for fire and pest resistance if possible. Cover with appropriate barrier material. The technique that fed necessity in 1943 remains valid today. Building science has come full circle. The industry abandoned newspaper insulation for profit rather than performance. Modern cellulose returns to the same material with improved treatment and professional installation. What wartime families knew has been proven correct. Paper works. It always did. Millions of families stuffed newspapers into their walls during World War II because they had no other choice. What they discovered accidentally has taken the building industry 80 years to acknowledge. Paper insulation manages moisture that foam traps. Paper achieves fire resistance that foam cannot match without barriers. Paper lasts for generations while foam degrades within decades. The shift to foam followed economics, not science. Petroleum products generated profits. Modern marketing sold better than traditional methods. Building codes reflected industry input rather than performance testing. Modern cellulose insulation returns to wartime principles. Recycled newspaper, borate treatment, and proper installation create insulation that outperforms foam in most real-world conditions. The contractors discovering 80-year-old newspapers in wall cavities keep finding the same thing: dry paper, solid wood, and homes that have outlasted every prediction. Sometimes the old ways worked better. This is one of those times.